The Holocaust and the Exodus. Today, I'm going to briefly introduce the history of persecutions by Jews under the Nazi regime and the Palestine issue caused by a dual British contract. It's an immature explanation, but please enjoy the presentation. This is index of my presentations. 1. Pre-sequence. 2. Anti-Semitism becomes law. 3. Palestine, riots and revolt. 4. The darkest hour of Jewish history. 5. Exodus. This is Theodor Held, Austro-Hungarian Jewish journalist, playwright, political activist, and writer who was the father of modern political Zionism. In the late 19th century, a political scandal erupted in France over allegations of espionage by a Jewish military officer, Dreyfus. Theodor Held called this case an expression of intractable European anti-Semitism and identified it as the personal turning point. So, he started to present Zionism, argued that Zionism was born of a basic need and human right. Zionism is the nationalist movement of the Jewish people that espouses the re-establishment of and support for a Jewish state in the territory defined as the historic land of Israel. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the worst persecutions occurred in Russia. In the 1930s, the epicenter of European anti-Semitism moved to Adolf Hitler's Germany. Jews migrated to Palestine to escape persecutions in Germany, but for the Arab side of Palestine, the new influx of Jews was an invasion. The Palestine issue began like this, and it was the beginning of an unceasing civil war. Anti-Semitism becomes law. The law for the protection of German blood and honor-bound marriage explicitly excluding Jews from being identified as Germans. The second law, the League citizenship law, the distinguish between persons of German blood and those of non-German blood. The former was classified as Aryans. Non-Aryans are thoroughly deprived of their rights in citizenship of the Third League. Third League is a name for the government Adolf Hitler introduced when he took the power in 1933. Surprisingly, the Nazis' persecutions of Jews was not about religion, but about race and blood. The Nuremberg laws were used to legalize discrimination against Jews, who were barred from voting and running for political office, as well as prevented from most professions, including teaching, the law, medicine, and journalism. Public education was denied to Jews past the age of 14, and such public amenities as parks, beaches, and libraries were closed to Jews. This is the picture of Yellow Badge. In September 1939, Nazi officials ordered Jews in Germany put the yellow badge onto their altar. Emigration and exile. Beginning in 1933, rural Jews were subjected to internal exile, driven off their farms. These policies coincided with the official encouragement of voluntary immigration abroad. However, those who left did so at enormous sacrifice. New German laws prevented Jews from leaving the country with most of their money. Everything they owned was confiscated. More than half of Germans, 500,000 Jews, voluntarily immigrated between 1933 and 1938. This is a picture of the number and location of Jews who moved out of Germany's anti-Semitic Nazi regime. A Night of Shattered Glass, Kristallnacht. In addition to organized discriminations, the German government sanctioned, encouraged, or instigated persecution. The first phase of truly organized persecutions culminated is as known as Kristallnacht. During November 9 and 20, 1938, Germans burned or destroyed more than 1,000 synagogues, 7,500 Jews' business, their windows smashed. At least 91 Jews were killed by mobs during the Kristallnacht, and many Jewish-related buildings were vandalized. So later, this case is called as Kristallnacht in German, which means Kristallnacht because the pieces of broken glasses were shiny like a crystal. No Aryans were arrested during the riot, but approximately 30,000 Jews were rounded up and sent to concentration camps. Concentration camp. Nazi concentration camps are those established and operated by Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler's in German domestic and European occupied terrorists for forced labor and genocide before and during World War II. The first concentration camp was set up in Germany before the war and forced prisoners of conscience against the Nazi regime. Western Allied prisoners who were Jewish or believed to be Jewish by the Nazis were usually held in prison camps as prisoners of war. However, some persecuted minors were sent to concentration camps under anti-Semitic policies. The camp was managed by the SS, which means an elite corps of German combat troops. This picture is about SS. Warsaw Ghetto. The number of Jews that Germany invaded Poland and came under the Nazi regime exploded. All camps have begun to flood with Jews, and Polish Jews are forced out of the ghetto area. The ghetto area began to overflow with severe poverty, hunger, and disease. This is a picture of the starving children of ghetto. But ghetto was just the first step of the genocide planned by Nazis. More and more large camps were designed for execution purposes. Between 1933 and the outbreak of World War II in 1939, 170,000 European Jews immigrated to Palestine. Amid ongoing violence between Arabs and Jews, the Arab High Commission formally petitioned the British authority in 1935 to halt Jewish immigration. The Arab response to Jewish immigration was by no means anti-Semitic to many Arabs, particularly those in Palestine, but a European invasion. The Peel Commission Report. The British government appointed Lord Robert Peel to head a commission to study the problem and make recommendations of bloody civil war between Arabs and Haganah. The Peel report identified the cause of the ongoing violences as the Arabs' desire for national independence. So the report recommended partitioning Palestine. This is the picture of map that recommended partitioning Palestine. The Arabs opposed the partition plan and condemned it unanimously. The Arab High Committee opposed the idea of a Jewish state and called for an independent state of Palestine. Surprisingly, the Zionist Congress substantially accepted the Peel proposal. Britain issues a new white paper. Britain holds a meeting to resolve the ongoing Palestine conflict and issues a new diplomatic white paper in March 1939. These are excerpts from some of the white paper. Part 1. Within a decade, Arabs and Jews are asked to build an independent Palestine state jointly governed by the proportions of the population. More than 450,000 Jews have settled in the delegated region, and the Balfour Declarations, which include the constructions of a Jewish community, has been realized. Part 2. Immigration. Over the next 5 years, 1950 to 1954, only up to 75,000 Jewish immigrants will be allocated. Since then, the immigration scale has to be agreed upon by Arabs. Part 3. Territory. Restrict Jews' right to buy Arab land. Unsurprisingly, the Zionists reject the White Paper. The Jewish Agency called the White Paper a breach of faith and a surrender to Arab terrorism. The darkest hour of Jewish history. This is the testimony of a worker who worked in a concentration camp during the Nazis' incessant Holocaust. Train carried Jews through the prison's cargo ramp. It is loaded once a day, up to 5 times a day. People are constantly disappearing from Europe's heart and coming here without knowing the fate of the freight that arrived earlier. And those in this mess, I know what about to happen. 9 out of 10 will be in the gas chamber. Adolf Hitler's anti-Semitic policy, the end of national self-determination, was the Holocaust. This picture shows a gas can have used to mass kill Jews in a camp, and the picture next to it is the hair left from the bodies of the victims that evaporated. German and the 21 German occupied countries were swept by what was later called the Holocaust. Before it began, Europe had a Jewish population of about 9 million. When it was over, 6 million were dead, 2/3 of Europe's Jews. The horror of Nazi Germany put tremendous moral and humanitarian pressure on all parties, Jewish, Arab, British, who had a stake in Palestine. The one major Arab leader, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, made a direct alliance with Adolf Hitler. Ben-Gurion, chairman of the executive committee of the Jewish Agency in Palestine, who doesn't like British because of White Paper. But he encouraged young men to volunteer to go to war, participated in British Army. Ben-Gurion argued that could be a cornerstone of build Hebrew army capable of defeating both the Arabs and British someday. In fact, Britain had no intention of making the Arabs independent. Britain had a plan to divide the Arab region with France before exchanging letters with Hussein, and even signed a Sykes-Picot agreement with France. At the same time, Britain announces the Balfour Declarations that it will lay off the current land of Israel to Jews in order to draw support from Jews in the war. Amin actively supported Hitler's anti-Semitism, and Hitler also promised Amin that he would do his best to support the Arab national movement. This is the famous Amin al-Husseini said, "Arabs, rise as one man and fight for your sacred right. Kill the Jews wherever you find them. This pleases God, history, and religion. This saves your honor. God is with you." Both Haganah and the Irgun followed Ben-Gurion's lead and assisted with British war effort in Palestine. The appeal was deferred, but in September 1940, Jewish battalions were created as part of the regular British Army. As much later, July 3, 1944, British finally created Jewish Brigade, a part of regular British Army. Exodus. The end of World War II in 1945 created a refugee crisis of unprecedented proportions. Between 1 million and 20 million persons were displaced, uprooted from their original homes and families, which in many cases no longer even existed. Among these were more than a 250,000 Jews, survivors of the Holocaust, living in camps and urban centers in Germany, Australia, and Italy. On May 1, 1946, a special Anglo-American Inquiry Committee issues a recommendation that 100,000 certificates be immediately authorized for the admission into Palestine of Jews who have been victims of Nazi and fascist persecution. This was, of course, far in excess of the 1939 British White Paper quotas, a problem the committee tried to get around by renouncing the idea of Palestine as either an Arab or a Jewish state. In all, British forces interdicted about half of the 142 voyages of Elizabeth vessels, sending some 50,000 would-be immigrants to internment camps. The most famous of the immigrant ships, an old American steamer launched in 1928 as the SS President's Warfield and renamed by Elizabeth, the Exodus 1947 carried 4,550 hopeful immigrants when it put to sea on July 11, 1947. The United Nations Act. The UN accepted from Britain the handoff responsibility for Palestine in November 1974, passed Resolution 181, which partitioned Palestine, dividing it into an Arab state of 4,500 square miles and Jewish state 5,500 square miles. Hardline Zionists wanted all of the Palestine. However, moderates believed that the partitions was the best deal the Jews were going to get. In contrast, Arab leaders were united in rejecting the resolutions. They argued that the United Nations had no authority to give away half of an Arab nation. But the dissent of Arabs who actually lived in Palestine was dismissed. Israel is born. On May 14, 1948, the day the British withdrew from their Palestine mandate, Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion read the declarations of establishment of the State of Israel. Think about. Israelis called the event independence, a word meaning extraordinary depth meaning for the post-Holocaust. But the Arabs call it al-Nakba, the tragedy. So, the Israel-Palestine conflict has two sides. Independence for one person is a tragedy for another. This tragic conflict will be a major challenge for the International Committee to resolve in the issue. Thank you for listening to my presentations, and I hope you pay attention to the international community problem sincerely.